I was David's stand-in for 10 years. The day Dylan showed up, David tossed a debit card and a set of house keys at me. You've been with me for a long time. I won't treat you unfairly. Take the money and leave. Don't ever let Dylan see you. I squatted down, my hands behind my back, and picked up the card from the floor. The hand I kept hidden was clutching a report confirming a terminal illness, my nails digging into my palm. 2 months later, a friend came to visit me in the hospital and told me how David was spoiling Dylan rotten. I looked down and gave a bitter smile. Does David love Dylan that much? Probably not. He just looks more like him than I do. Even their names are the same. A sudden thought crossed my mind. I wonder how David would react if he knew I had the same disease as Mark. Everyone at the office secretly calls Dylan the little boss. David even gave him free rein to come and go from his personal office as he pleases. My friend David glanced at me cautiously after he finished speaking. It looks like David's really fallen for him this time. He looked at me again, his voice gentle. Leo, you should let go too. Just focus on getting better and follow the treatment plan. I lowered my head and laughed at myself. But when I spoke, I said, don't worry about me. How's work been for you lately? David sighed. Same old, we chatted for a little while longer, and he didn't leave until he saw how tired I was getting. But I didn't rest. Instead, I changed into my regular clothes and went to the bar David always used to go to. I ordered a Long Island iced tea and sat quietly at the counter. I used to come here with David all the time, so the bartender on duty recognized me. Haven't seen you in a while, he said with a nod. I forced a smile and asked him, how's Mr. White been? Does he still come around much? I'm only telling you this because you're asking, he said, leaning in. Mr. White hasn't been coming by as often. Word is, the new guy he's with doesn't like noisy places. I nodded but didn't leave. I knew David would be here tonight. He always comes here on this night to drink alone. Because today is the anniversary of Mark's death. Sure enough, when David appeared at the bar, a dark mood hung over him. As I watched him, his eyes met mine. He paused for a second. Then instead of heading upstairs, he walked toward me. What are you doing here? I can't even come for a drink anymore? I held up my untouched glass. He gave a slight smirk and stared at me for a long moment. You've gotten thin, he said suddenly. Are you skipping meals again? Hearing what sounded like concern in his voice made my heart ache. I shot back, if I get thinner, will I look even more like him? He was very thin because of the illness. The concern on David's face froze, replaced by a cold expression. He stared at me without saying a word. I told you I don't like hearing you talk about him. So is that why you broke up with me? Because I couldn't stop myself from mentioning him sometimes? He didn't answer, just looked away. In that instant, I understood. I crossed a line. I composed myself and smiled at him again. The curve of my lips was identical to that of his first love, etched in his memory. I knew he liked this smile. This was when I looked the most like him. If I promise never to mention him again, can you come back to me? David, it's been storming so much lately. I'm scared of the thunder. Please say yes. Hold me to sleep like you used to on every stormy night. Even for just one night. It's my last wish before I die. Forgive me for being greedy one last time. I just want you with me for the final stretch. Just a little while is all I ask. I won't let you see me at my ugliest. As I expected, he seemed to lose himself for a second when he saw my smile. His hand rose instinctively, as if to touch my face. I stood perfectly still, my heart pounding with nervous anticipation. Just as his fingers were about to graze my cheek, a voice suddenly called out from behind me. David. David, and I turned around at the same time. He snatched his hand back as if he'd been burned. I froze for a moment, then turned my head and finally saw the famous Dylan. He really did look like Mark. It wasn't just the face, his whole aura was the same. The newcomer looked young, probably still in college, with incredibly clear eyes. The moment David saw him, his expression softened. What are you doing here? Why can't I be here? Are you out drinking with some pretty boy behind my back? Dylan walked up, brazenly looking me up and down while clinging to David's arm, staking his claim. So loud in here. Let's go to the private room upstairs. He furrowed his delicate brows, pouting at David. I watched him with cold eyes. Though David's momentary reaction had surprised me, I knew he didn't go for this kind of pouty act. The man's heart was as cold as steel. and he hated people telling him what to do. Dylan was still too young, carelessly spending the affection David had for him. But he didn't know that David's affection was directly proportional to how much he resembled Mark. It was a finite resource. Once it was gone, it was gone. I expected to see a flash of impatience on David's face. But in the next second, I saw him dotingly pat Dylan's head and agree. Okay, let's go upstairs. Today was the anniversary of Mark's death. In previous years, David always spent it alone. He refused anyone's company on this day, including mine. But today, he didn't refuse Dylan. I stood there, stunned, watching them walk away. Before heading up the stairs, Dylan turned and shot me a look. His dark eyes swirled with thick contempt and malice. In that instant, I felt like I'd been plunged into ice water. How could anyone in the world look so much like Mark? That one glance was identical to the way Mark used to look at me. After returning to my hospital room, I was tormented by nightmares all night. Mark, bleeding from his eyes, nose, and mouth, stared straight at me, his mouth moving, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. I only knew that his every word was like a mountain crushing me. Then he morphed into Dylan. I woke up with a start, drenched in a cold sweat. Took me a long time to calm down. I didn't expect to have an unwelcome guest right after my morning checkup. Dylan was holding a fruit basket, the kind you could tell was bought from the gift shop by the hospital entrance. I've heard about you from David's friends. He got straight to the point. They all say I look a lot like you, but I don't see it. You just look so pathetic. But you must have made a nice little pile of cash from being with David all these years, right? I looked into your family. Parents died early, raised by your uncle, who's just a regular middle-class guy who just finished paying off his debts. And yet, here you are in a private room. I heard David even gave you a condo? I watched him silently, not answering. He didn't seem to need a response anyway. He continued on his own. I've seen plenty of gold diggers like you. If you're really that hard up for cash, I could be generous and give you a sum. He lifted his chin and looked down at me. Name your price. Then stop trying to see David. I stared at him for a long moment, then suddenly let out a breath of relief. That look he gave me yesterday almost made me think Mark had come back from the dead. Thank God. He just looked like him. He wasn't Mark. The money David gave me is enough. You can go now. I didn't get another chance to find David, and my luck ran out when it came to bumping into him at bars or pool halls. Not until he asked to meet me at a coffee shop, where he handed me an invitation to his wedding. I opened it and stared at the photo of David and Dylan, side by side. For a moment, my mind went blank. I clutched the invitation, completely at a loss. I opened my mouth and tried a few times before any sound came out. You're getting married? I looked at David across the table. He looked back, his sharp brows knitted together slightly. We can't get a license. Dylan just wanted a wedding. He asked, why are you getting so thin? Leo, even though we broke up, you should still take care of yourself. I cut him off. Because Dylan wanted a wedding, you just gave him one? I suddenly felt like I was suffocating, unable to breathe. I asked him, my voice trembling, if I wanted a wedding, would you give me one? His breath hitched. He looked away, not answering. Does he really look that much like Mark? The man across from me was committed to his silence. Even though we're not together, I still want you to have your own, healthy life. If you're short on money, just contact my assistant. I'll have him send you living expenses regularly. With that, he turned and left without a shred of hesitation. I collapsed onto the coffee shop sofa and sat there in a daze for a long, long time. David was always like this, utterly heartless, yet so proper, sending me regular payments after a breakup as if we hadn't broken up but divorced. Mr. Smith? Mr. Smith? The nurse's slightly raised voice pulled me out of my nightmare. I gasped for air, a movement that felt like my chest was being torn apart. Another wave of pain hit. It was so intense my brows furrowed, and a cold sweat quickly beaded on my forehead. The nurse looked at me, a trace of pity in her eyes. Her voice softened. It's time to change your forebag. The blood's backing up into the line. Mr. Smith, don't you have any family who can look after you? I shook my head. After catching my breath, I held out my left wrist with the hospital band for the nurse to scan. She efficiently scanned it and swapped in the new forebag. Before she left, she hesitated, then finally said, Mr. Smith, you should really hire a caregiver to help you. I just shook my head again, a faint smile on my pale lips. Thank you, but not for now. My parents died when I was young, and my only remaining relatives are my uncle and aunt. The pain of their own son's early death, compounded by the massive debts they took on for Mark's medical treatments, had made them look much older than their years. When Mark was alive, my aunt and uncle always told me to let him have his way, so I had to give him the toys I liked. I couldn't get mad when he tore up my homework. On the rare occasion he felt like going to school, I had to give him my place and stay home obediently. My uncle always said, "Mark is sick, Leo. You need to be the bigger person." And I was for 10 years. I even let the person I loved most become his boyfriend. But after he died, my uncle and aunt truly did treat me like their own son. They've been through enough. There's no need to make them go through the pain of burying a child all over again. Mark was right. The fore fluid is really cold. Starting from the tip of the catheter, the chill of the medicine flows through your veins, spreading through your entire body. It feels like it's trying to freeze you solid. When people are cold and desperate, do they instinctively move toward the sun? By the time I realized what I was doing, my phone had already dialed David's number. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the end call button, but I couldn't press it. The ringtone echoed, unhurried, one ring after another. Just when I thought it would go to voicemail, he answered. Hello? His deep, reassuring voice came through the phone. He waited a few seconds for a response, then asked again, Leo, is something wrong? I hadn't spoken in a while, and my throat was so tight I could barely make a sound. My mind was blank. I just said whatever came to me first. I've been sick lately, and my family, they're not around. Can you come see me? What kind of sick? Is it serious? His tone immediately grew grave. So that's why you've lost so much weight? Because you're sick? What is it? What hospital are you in? For a second, I wanted to tell him everything. To tell David that I was sick, that I was dying. To ask him if he could come be with me. To tell him that I was the one he met first. That I was the one he saved. That I was the one who turned his bubble tea into a meal with extra toppings. That I was the one who climbed a mountain with him and talked all night. That I was the one who watched the sunrise with him. That I was the one who agreed to apply to the same college. That all those moments of perfect connection were with me. My lips moved. Can you come see me? There's something I need to tell you. Just tell him everything before I die. Be brave. One last time. David, hurry up and come try on the tux. A cheerful male voice suddenly cut through from his end of the line. The words caught in my throat and slowly sank along with my heart. David answered the other person first, then spoke to me quickly. I'll have my assistant contact you later. If you need any medical or financial assistance, just tell him. I gripped my phone tightly. David, are you really getting married? There was a 2-second pause on the other end, then a soft, yeah. Tears instantly welled in my eyes, blurring my vision. Well then, congratulations. I'll be there, at the time and place on the invitation, dressed for the occasion. Winter had already arrived in Chicago, but the Hawaiian sun was as brilliant as ever. On the golden beach, a red carpet was laid out, adorned with sheer white fabric. Roses, freshly flown in from Northern Europe, were still vibrant and dewy even under the scorching sun. Everything about it showed just how much care the hosts had put into this wedding. My seat was very close to the front. I didn't know if it was David's or Dylan's arrangement. Either way, you could call it a very pointed gesture, making the ex-boyfriend witness their happiness. I was wearing a white 3-piece suit. It was a handmade suit David had taken me to get tailored just 6 months ago. But now, hanging on this chronically ill body, it felt cavernously large, as out of place as a clown in a burlap sack. The tropical sun beat down on my exposed skin, quickly turning it red. My illness had made me especially sensitive to UV rays. I licked my dry lips, feeling an irrepressible itch in my throat. I tried to hold it back, but I couldn't stop a couple of coughs from escaping into my hand. My palm felt wet. I pulled it away and saw it was covered in bloody froth. The live band was playing Mozart's Minuet from Don Giovanni, a cheerful melody. It was the same song that was playing in the background at the tea shop the second time we met. Dylan, also dressed in a perfectly tailored white suit, walked over to me with David. I instinctively hid my right hand behind my back. He looked down at me, a malicious, fake smile on his face. Leo, it's so wonderful that you could come to my wedding with David. Thank you for keeping him company for 10 years before I showed up. You were the one who was with him while he grew from a boy into a mature man. Our wedding would have felt incomplete without you here to see it. He squinted at me, and seeing the color drain from my face, he looked away, satisfied, and turned to coo at David. Isn't that right, David? But David wasn't looking at him. He was staring at me, his brow furrowed. How did you get so thin? What exactly are you sick with? My assistant said you never contacted him. I looked up at him. He was standing against the light, and whether by chance or by design, he was blocking the scorching sun for me. I had just started to speak when Dylan's voice cut me off. David, it's almost time. You said today was special. We can't miss the auspicious moment for the wedding. He tugged at David's sleeve, his initial composure gone, his smile looking a bit forced. You promised. The 10-year promise. It's today, isn't it? David's gaze darkened, and he finally looked away from me. Before he left, he said hastily, "Don't leave after the ceremony. I'll come find you." Couldn't believe it. What did he mean? He was going to find me after his wedding for a secret rendezvous with his ex? Was that how little he thought of me? Then again, it was me who had shamelessly clung to him for 10 years. If it weren't for this face that looked so much like Mark's, he probably would have found me an incredible nuisance, right? I couldn't stop coughing. But just then, the wedding march began, and the soaring music drowned out the sound. Everyone's attention was on the two grooms. Dylan, smiling, walked alone down one end of the red carpet toward David at the other. Amid the guests' blessings, he waved generously, a blissful smile on his face. I coughed uncontrollably, feeling like I was going to hack up a lung. On the stage, a blonde, blue-eyed officiant was smiling. "Mr. David White, do you take Mr. Mark Smith to be your lawfully wedded husband? To have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, in joy and in sorrow, and to love him without reservation." My eyes shot wide open. He said Mark. He actually said Mark. Mark. He's been dead for so many years, yet I'm still living in his shadow. I couldn't hold myself up any longer and crumpled over, my body curling in on itself. I clutched my hands over my mouth, trying to stifle the endless coughing. But it was no use. Fresh blood filled my palms and trickled through my fingers, dripping onto my white trousers and blooming into crimson flowers. Then, they all merged into one large patch. Through the haze, I heard gasps of shock from the guests around me, but I couldn't pay them any mind. My consciousness began to fade, and I pitched forward uncontrollably. But I didn't hit the ground. I fell into an embrace, a very warm embrace, just as warm as the one that shielded me from the bully's baseball bat on the day of my college entrance exams. The last thing I heard was David's frantic, desperate cry. "Leo! Leo, don't you scare me. Somebody call an ambulance." What was David like at 18? Back then, my whole family had moved to Chicago for Mark's medical treatment. I had just transferred to a new school when I started hearing all the legends about David. He had won so many awards. They said his certificates and honors piled up as fast as he grew. Eventually, his height stopped at 6 feet 2 inches, but the certificates kept coming. On the day of the college entrance exams, I was heading back to school after grabbing lunch when a group of thugs cornered me. They didn't hurt me, just herded me into a deserted alley. "Hey, someone doesn't want you making it to your exam. Just hang out here for a bit. When the time's up, we'll let you go." I was on the verge of tears, but no amount of begging or threatening could make them move. That's when David appeared. He grabbed my hand and ran with me to the exam hall. But he got hurt in the process, a fracture in his right arm. "What about your arm?" I hadn't cried when the thugs surrounded me. I hadn't even cried when I thought I might miss my exam. But looking at David's brow, furrowed in pain, and his right arm hanging unnaturally at his side, my tears fell uncontrollably. "It's fine. Go take your test. Just remember to tell your teachers and parents afterward. Be careful for the next couple of days." He turned and left without another word, never asking why I'd been targeted. He had descended like a god from heaven, saved me, and then departed as if it were nothing. He became the boldest, most vivid brushstroke of my youth. Afterward, I heard the rest of the story from my classmates. On the day of the exams, David the legend got his right arm broken by thugs while saving someone. He still took the test, writing with his left hand. What? Didn't he turn down his early admission? What if he bombs the exam? New. This is David we're talking about. Even with all that, he still got the top score in the city. The guy's a freaking genius. Who was the lucky person he saved? So romantic. Why wasn't it me? That lucky person was me, I said silently to myself. An indescribable mix of sorrow and joy swelled in my heart. Thank God the injury didn't affect his score. I started paying more and more attention to David, searching for any news about him in class group chats and on his school's forums. The second time we met was at the bubble tea shop where I had a summer job. He came in with a group of friends to buy drinks. I secretly loaded his cup with extra toppings. After that, they came every day. I gradually learned that they met up at a nearby basketball court every day. Until the 14th day, the group came in laughing and fooling around. One lemonade. I'll have a mango pomelo sago extra ice. Mango coconut. Brown sugar boba. When I heard David's voice, the corners of my mouth lifted on their own before I quickly pressed them back down. I looked down to take the order, using the brim of my work cap to hide my flushing face. Okay, one moment, please. Suddenly, the brim of my cap was lifted. I looked up, startled. David was looking down at me, a slight smile on his lips, a little less on the boba and toppings. I don't like drinking porridge. In that instant, all the blood in my body rushed to my face. My voice was as faint as a mosquito's buzz. Okay, I think my heart broke, pounded out of control all afternoon. It didn't stop even after David left. Because of David, I looked forward to work every day. But the next day I was late. When I woke up, it was already 3 in the afternoon. I immediately got up and rushed to the tea shop. But before I even got there, I saw David walking out from a distance. Next to him was another person, someone who looked almost identical to me. Mark, my cousin. It was the height of summer, but a cold sweat broke out on my back. I knew why I had slept until 3 o'clock. Mark had trouble sleeping and always kept sleeping pills on hand. That afternoon, he insisted I take some vitamins with him. It wasn't the first time he'd done something strange, so I didn't think much of it. Watching David smile down at Mark, I clenched my fists. I wanted to rush over, separate them, and push Mark away. Tell him to get away from David. David seemed to sense my intense emotions and looked over. My first instinct was to hide behind a wall. The second I realized what I had done, I froze. I was so used to yielding to Mark. Habit is a terrifying thing. That afternoon, I drifted home like a ghost, not knowing how I got there. As soon as I walked in, I saw Mark sitting on the sofa. He smiled when he saw me, revealing his sharp canine teeth. Leo, you're back. Did you have fun this afternoon? Hearing that, my eyes instantly turned red. I glared at him. What the hell do you want? He stood up and walked over to me, a sick flush on his pale face. I knew something was off with you lately, so the little kitten is in love. Leo, you like men? His name is David, right? He's pretty handsome. My throat tightened. I denied it. No, I don't like men. Is that so? Well, if you don't like him, then I'll go after him. You can't. I blurted out. His smile vanished. He squinted at me. Why not? I was speechless. I didn't dare say that I liked David. I could only stammer, you're both guys, so what if we are? It's not like this body of mine can date and marry a woman. Can it? I fell silent for a moment. Whenever Mark brought up his health, I couldn't say a single harsh word to him. But David might not even like men. I think he does. Mark smiled again. It was a smile of absolute certainty. I suddenly felt a wave of panic. Ever since we were kids, Mark had never failed to get what he wanted. But David, he was the first person in my entire life who had helped me without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. I liked him, I loved him. I looked at Mark with pleading eyes. Please don't like him, okay? You're not right for each other. Mark looked at me, his eyes growing icy. Not right? How are we not right? Do you think he's too good for me? Or is it because I could die any day, and you think I'll just be a burden to him? My throat constricted. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? Mark advanced and I shrank back, until my back hit the door, and there was nowhere left to retreat. Leo, you're healthy. You have a normal life. You have classmates, teachers, friends. While you're out playing with your friends in PE class, I'm in a hospital room getting in 4. Do you have any idea how cold I feel when all those different drugs flow into my body? Starting from my arm, the medicine slowly eats away at me. The hospital room is like an ice cave, trying to trap me there until I die. His gaze grew distant, then twisted into a look of hatred. Hatred for his unfair fate, for his illness, for me. He stared at me, his voice raspy. Leo, if I hadn't lost so much blood saving you back then, do you think my immune system would have crashed? Do you think I would have gotten leukemia? It felt like an invisible pair of hands was choking me. A feeling of suffocation spread from my lungs, and it felt like a mountain was crushing me. When I was little, I was almost hit by a car. Mark saved me. He pushed me out of the way and got hit himself. His arm was deeply cut and he lost a lot of blood. Not long after that, he was diagnosed with leukemia. I couldn't say another word to argue with him. I bowed my head deeply, my back, which I had forced to stay straight, finally bent as if under an unbearable weight. I was unconscious, but it felt like I was awake. Could feel someone holding me tightly. Over and over they repeated, blood, so much blood. Stop bleeding, Mark. Stop bleeding, Leo, don't die, I'm begging you. He murmured our names back and forth, mixing them up. Until finally, it was just my name. I was wrong. I remember now. It was me, Leo, I was wrong. Don't do this, please stop bleeding. When I woke up, David was sitting by my hospital bed. I had never seen him look so disheveled. He looked like he hadn't slept or groomed himself in 3 days. His eyes were exhausted and shadowed with dark circles, his stubble unkempt. When he saw my eyes open, a look of pure joy erupted on his face. You're awake. His voice was so hoarse it was as if he hadn't spoken in days. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My mouth and nose were filled with the metallic taste of blood. He gently stroked my hair and whispered, "It's okay. Leo, you're going to be okay. I'll get the doctor." He pressed the call button by the bed. The doctor came, did a quick examination, and then left the room. David followed him out. I don't know what they said outside, but when David came back in, the despair on his face was even deeper. I looked at him, my empty eyes curving into a smile. "I'm so sorry for ruining your wedding. But you see, I'm still the one who's most like Mark. We even have the exact same illness." The moment the words left my mouth, David's face twitched. His expression went blank for a second. The next moment, he fell to his knees beside my bed, grabbing my hand. The pain in his eyes was about to overflow.
I'm sorry, Leo.
"I'm so sorry. It was me who forgot. I shouldn't have treated you like a stand-in. It was me who forgot. I deserve to die. Please don't punish me like this. Don't be sick, Leo. Don't bleed. You have to get better." He repeated the same few phrases over and over. Tears streamed from the corners of my eyes. I could tell something was very wrong with him, but I was too tired. My heart was tired, my body was tired. The next second, I fell back into a deep sleep. I don't know how much time had passed before I woke up again. The first thing I did when I opened my eyes was scan the room. But I didn't see David. I thought numbly, of course. He left. He left me. This cruel, vicious person who didn't have long to live. I wasn't sad, just numb. But my eyes blurred anyway, and tears trickled into my hair and my ears. An uncomfortable feeling. "Leo," a gentle female voice spoke. I turned toward the sound and saw the blurry figure of a woman sitting by my bed. She leaned down and wiped my tears away with a tissue. My vision gradually cleared, and I saw her face. She was a beautiful woman with a gentle face. Her eyes were slightly red, and she looked a little worn out. It was David's mother, Mrs. Ming. Mrs. Ming gave me a soft smile. "Leo, are you looking for David? Don't worry. He just had an episode. I had some people take him for treatment. He's in the room right next to yours." My heart clenched. I squeezed out a few words. "What episode?" Mrs. Ming's eyes grew redder. "Post-traumatic stress disorder. You know about it?" "Yes, I did." I let my head fall back onto the pillow. David had PTSD. He got it when he was 18. That was the year he and Mark were kidnapped. He was the only one who came back alive. After that, he developed PTSD, because the person he loved most had died right in front of him. Many times he would murmur in his sleep during a nightmare, "Blood, so much blood. Stop bleeding. I knew about it, which was why I never dared to bring up Mark around him. It was also why I was afraid to tell him the truth. That the Mark who went through that life-or-death experience with him wasn't me, Leo. From that day on, it felt like I had lost the right to confess everything. My gaze drifted. Mrs. Ming, are you here to yell at me? I'm the one who triggered David's episode. Her expression grew even sadder. She touched my face. Her hand was as warm as I remembered my mother's being. She said, "How could I blame you? This is all my fault and his father's. If only we hadn't." She stopped herself mid-sentence. "There are some things I shouldn't be the one to tell you. Leo, you just relax and focus on getting better. David will explain everything to you. Whatever mistakes were made, they were mine and David's father's. It's not David's fault, and it's certainly not your fault. Leo, medical science is much more advanced than it was 10 years ago. You have to have faith. Your illness can definitely be cured." I didn't understand what she meant, but it felt like I was grasping at something. This feeling of being shrouded in fog was suffocating. But soon, the intense physical pain left me no room to think about anything else. That night, I was moved back to the ICU. My condition had worsened to the final stage. There was no cure. The next time I saw David was a week later. I was feeling surprisingly good that afternoon, so a nurse wheeled me outside for some fresh air. As we rounded a bend on the hospital's tree-lined path, I saw David standing under a ginkgo tree, also dressed in a patient gown. He walked toward me, step by step, and finally knelt in front of me, taking my hand and pressing it to his cheek. I had never seen him look so grief-stricken. He wasn't crying, but it made my heart ache with a sour pain. I hadn't looked in a mirror in a long time, but I had seen Mark when he was lying in the ICU. It was an ugly sight, and I probably looked 100 times worse now. I said to David, "It's ugly. Don't look. I used to wish your eyes were on me 24/7. But now your gaze feels like a needle, and it hurts so much." As I spoke, a sob caught in my throat. His voice was hoarse. "You're not ugly," he said. He pushed my wheelchair under the ginkgo tree. After a long silence, I asked, "Are you still going ahead with your wedding?" He suddenly dropped to one knee. "Do you want to have a wedding?" I laughed, a deeply ironic laugh. "What, wasn't Mark the one you made a 10-year promise with?" His face froze, and a flash of pain crossed his eyes.
I'm sorry, Leo.
I remembered it wrong. I remembered everything wrong. He said, "At first, I couldn't tell you and Mark apart. But later, I realized you weren't the same person. I was going to tell him that day, make things clear, but then we were kidnapped." My breathing slowly stopped. I stared blankly at David. What did he mean, he realized we weren't the same person? He knew all along? Then why did he treat me like that for 10 years? He was kidnapped because of me. The kidnappers were only supposed to take me to extort my parents. They asked about his relationship with me. I said I didn't know him. I told the kidnappers that Mark's family had no money, that he was sick and probably wouldn't live long, and that they should let him go. But Mark told them he was my boyfriend. He said I was only saying those things to get him out of trouble. And then those people tortured him to death right in front of me. There was so much blood everywhere. On the floor, on the walls, everywhere, it was all blood. David started mechanically repeating the same words again, out of control. But this time, he pulled himself out of it after a few moments. He looked at me with despair. "After that, I forgot you." All I had left in my memory were his words. I only remembered that my boyfriend's name was Mark, and that he died trying to buy time to save me. I closed my eyes. I never saw Mark's body. My uncle and aunt just told me he died from his illness. But he was tortured to death. Even though I had hated him so much, the first image that came to my mind was of my parents' funeral, when my uncle brought me home and a young Mark reached out his hand to me with a smile. After a long silence, I asked, "David, can you really tell me and Mark apart?" He answered immediately, "My illness is treated now. I can tell. Leo, I can tell you apart. The first time I saw you, you were cornered by a group of thugs who were trying to stop you from taking your exam. The second time was when you went to school to ask a teacher about college applications. You can't tell us apart. I never once saw you at my school." After I said it, I couldn't help but cough. A metallic sweetness rose in my throat, and I swallowed it down. "I can," David explained frantically. "The south-facing windows of my school science building looked out over your administration building. I spent a lot of time in the lab back then. I saw you almost every day, He recounted our shared past, piece by piece. As I listened, tears fell without my noticing. So he really could tell us apart. But it's too late. I pulled my lips into a smile that was uglier than crying. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. 10 years too late.
I'm dying.
David immediately covered my mouth. You're not going to die. Leo, you're not going to die. Just hold on a little longer. The doctors will fix this. I moved my lips, but before I could speak, I felt something trickling from my nose. David's face twisted in horror. He trembled as he tried to wipe the blood from my face. But he couldn't wipe it all away. My head grew heavy, and I felt the strength draining from my body, bit by bit. Maybe it wasn't my strength. Maybe it was my life force. I watched David's expression shift from horror to utter despair. In a daze, I saw him again as he was the first time we met. That brilliant, high-spirited young man. Thank you for letting me know you loved me before I died. It makes the last 10 years of holding on feel a little less like a joke. Don't talk anymore, Leo. Hold on. I'm taking you to a doctor. I'm already looking for a match. You're going to be saved. Just hold on a little longer. Okay? Leo, please, just hold on a little longer. David's choked sobs echoed in my ears. Hearing him made my heart feel like it was being wrung out. But my body hurt too much, and I was so tired. Life is so unfair. Took my parents when I was a child. Took Mark when I was a teenager and turned David into a stranger. And now that David finally remembers, it's coming to take me. David, I'm sorry, you have to live a good life. Don't get sick again. Eat well. Don't cry, no. Leo, please don't leave me. It was my fault. It was all my fault. Don't abandon me, Leo. I was so selfish. I had hoped that even in death, I could make David remember me for the rest of his life. But now that the moment was here, I regretted it. I shouldn't have done this.
I'm sorry, David.
It would have been better if you had never met me or Mark. You should have had a beautiful life and a healthy love. David, you have to be happy for the rest of your life. My eyelids finally closed. In the haze, I saw Mark at 7 years old. That was before he got sick, before his personality turned cruel and dark. His smile was bright and lovely. He held out his hand to me and said, "Come on, Leo." David's story. The first time I saw Leo was on the afternoon of the college entrance exams. He was cornered by a group of thugs, looking like he was about to cry but stubbornly refusing to let the tears fall. He was skinny, but his face was beautiful. His skin so pale it seemed to glow in the sun. I saved him. The price was a broken right arm. Good thing I'd practiced writing with my left hand back in the day to look cool. The next time I saw him was from the school's science building. Across the road and through the trees, I could see him talking to a teacher. My experiment was already done, but for some reason I kept going back to the lab every day to repeat the successful procedure. And to wait by the window, hoping for a glimpse of him coming to see his teacher. Later, the basketball court near my house closed for renovations, so I switched to a different one. I discovered he was working at a bubble tea shop near that court. So I spent the entire summer playing basketball there. Even when the one near my house reopened with upgraded equipment, I didn't switch back. My friends complained, why do we have to go to this court? It's so far and the commute is brutal. I got a good feel for this place. Look, I'll cover all your bubble tea for the rest of the summer. Okay? Whoa, say no more, David. I also feel like the feng shui at this court is way better. I watched him for a week. I had a feeling the kid I'd saved had recognized me, because he always loaded my bubble tea with extra toppings. And none of my friends got the same treatment. To be honest, I didn't really like all those toppings. But I figured it was his way of saying thank you, so I forced myself to finish it every time. Another week went by, and after my family doctor warned me for the third time that my sugar intake was way too high, I decided to talk to him. A little less on the boba and toppings, I said. I don't like drinking porridge. He froze for a second, then his face turned bright red as he mumbled his agreement. That day, my boba tea had exactly 4 pearls in it. I thought about it. For LOVE has 4 letters. Whoa, does this guy have a thing for me? But I don't like guys, or do I? I thought about it carefully. I guess I did not like them either. So, should I say yes? If I say yes now, is that moving too fast? But if I say no, what if he gets really upset? heartbroken even. I wanted to ask him. But the next day when I saw him, he was different. His face was very pale. He said he was sick. He also told me his name. He said, "My name is Mark." After that, I started getting to know him. But every time I said his name, he would look uncomfortable for a split second. Or he'd be half a beat slow to respond. And most of the time he was gentle and stubborn. But sometimes he'd become a little erratic, yet he'd always agree with me. Something was wrong. I admit it was a bit sleazy, but I followed him. And I discovered a secret. I felt like I'd been played. I was being passed back and forth on dates by a pair of cousins, if you could call aimless walks, watching sunrises, studying at the library, basketball lessons, and camping trips dates. After I figured it out, it was easy to separate the memories of my time with each of them. Though they looked almost identical, their personalities were very different. I knew with absolute certainty that the person I spent most of my time with was Leo. Leo using Mark's name. And the one I liked was Leo. But why would he do this? Why would he and his cousin trick me? After some digging, I figured out why Leo never came clean. Mark had cancer. His condition was poor. He might not have long to live. But that wasn't an excuse for him to use Leo's identity to play some kind of romance game. I wasn't his toy, and I certainly wasn't his boyfriend. I decided to confront him and then confess my feelings to Leo. But I never expected that Mark and I would be kidnapped that day. The kidnappers were vicious criminals. At first, I was able to stay calm and negotiate with them. The guy with me has cancer. His family is in debt from his medical bills. You won't get anything for kidnapping him. Let him go, and you can talk to my parents about how much money you want. I tried my best to act cold, to pretend Mark and I were strangers. It was the only way he might be safe. But deep inside me, there was a thought so vile I couldn't stand myself. I was actually thinking, thank God the one who came today was Mark, not Leo. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have been able to stay so composed. I had almost convinced the kidnappers. But Mark was a madman. He told them he was my boyfriend. "David, I know you're just saying that to help me escape, but I'm not leaving. I want to live or die with you." He looked at me, his words dripping with affection, but his eyes were filled with malice. He whispered in my ear, "You figured it out? Or did Leo tell you about me? Leo is so cruel. I told him I liked you, but he still fell in love with you. You're even crueler. You stole Leo from me. You two did this to me. You should both go to hell." The kidnappers thought I was lying. They needed me alive to negotiate with my parents. So they dragged Mark away. They tied him to a chair, placed him in front of me, and started cutting him. Blood flowed from Mark's body, across the floor, and pooled at my feet. My shoes, my pants, my shirt, they were all soaked in his blood. The blood was so cold I couldn't stop shivering. He lost his life bit by bit, right in front of me. Before he died, he looked at me and laughed maniacally, his teeth stained red with blood. He screamed, "David, you remember that I died for you. I'm your boyfriend. Mark, you have to remember me for the rest of your life. You have to remember 10 years from now you will marry the Mark you first met. You have to make him happy. He bled to death and I was rescued." No one knows what I was thinking when he died in front of me. Not even my therapist. The thought was too vile, so shameless it made me feel like an animal. I was thinking, thank God it was Mark on the date today. After I got back, I developed severe PTSD. The sight of red would send me into a panic, and I started engaging in self-harm. My parents thought I was traumatized by the kidnapping by watching Mark die, or maybe it was survivor's guilt. But I knew the truth. I was ashamed of my own vile, shameless thoughts. Whenever I saw red or anything related to that incident, to Mark or even to Leo, I would remember that shameless thought. I couldn't face it. I couldn't accept that ugly version of myself. My parents had no choice but to use medication and hypnosis to make me forget that memory. Under the influence of drugs and therapy, I gradually got better. But my brain automatically filled in the missing pieces of memory. I was David. My boyfriend's name was Mark. He died for me. I must have loved my boyfriend very much. Every time I thought of him, my heart felt like a huge piece was missing. No amount of entertainment, friends, studying, or debauchery could fill it. Until one day in my sophomore year, I met a student from the neighboring department. His name was Leo, and he looked almost exactly like my dead boyfriend. His personality was the same, too gentle with a touch of stubbornness. Whenever I held him, my heart would calm down. I should have been repulsed by the idea of a replacement, but I couldn't let him go. Even if holding him sometimes brought pain to us both. He never let go of me either. Maybe he loved me, but I couldn't return his feelings. Someone already occupied my heart. I couldn't forget Mark, who had died for me at only 18 years old. The patient's vital signs have stabilized. If there are no issues after 2 days of observation, he can be discharged. I was woken up by the sound of muffled crying. I opened my eyes to the hospital ceiling. I turned my head and saw my mother, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Mom, don't cry, David, don't hurt yourself anymore. It's not your fault. It's Mom and Dad's fault. We never should have put you through hypnosis. It's all our fault. My mother, usually so gentle, was sobbing hysterically. My sluggish brain started to work. I looked down at the thick gauze on my left wrist and slowly remembered. Leo was dead. He died in front of me in my arms. His body heat slowly dissipated. That beautiful face lost its color, turning pale and ashen. His lips turning a dark purple. I killed him. If I hadn't treated him as a substitute for 10 years, hurting him again and again, he wouldn't have lived such a repressed life. Maybe he wouldn't have gotten sick. He wouldn't have died. It was all my fault. I was too cowardly, too shameless. If only I had been a little braver, just a little bit braver, would everything have been different? I was a complete failure as a lover. But I couldn't be a failure as a son, too. I looked at my mother's exhausted face, closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, I was calm as still water.
Mom, I'm sorry.
I won't try to kill myself again. I haven't earned the right to die yet. I will take good care of my parents. They raised me, and I will see them through their old age. 20 years, 30 years, maybe 40. After they're gone, I will go find Leo. Leo, you don't have to wait for me. In the next life, it's okay if I can't be your lover. I just want to see you one more time. I'm sorry. Maybe if you had never met me, you would have had a happier, healthier life. You're so wonderful. Many people would have loved you. I could be the ginkgo tree in front of your house, a wildflower in a crack in the windowsill, or a little cat or dog you raise as a pet, just to be near you. As long as I can see you happy, that's enough. Leo, in the next life, please, you have to be happy.